For months, the James Webb Space Telescope has stared into the silent edges of our solar system, a region where light fades, time slows, and human instruments rarely dare to look. But in late September 2025, deep inside NASA's hidden data servers, scientists uncovered something that shouldn't exist. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't static. It was a repeating signal, pulsing every 6 hours from the exact coordinates of 3I Atlas, the mysterious interstellar object that once vanished beyond Mars. A rhythm too precise to be natural, and too structured to ignore. So what exactly did Webb detect out there? A cosmic malfunction, or an intelligent transmission from beyond our solar system? In this video, we'll uncover what NASA tried to hide, the decoded patterns buried in Webb's data, and the chilling reason some astronomers believe this signal wasn't meant for us at all. When 3I Atlas was first detected, it was cataloged as the third interstellar object ever found, a rocky, elongated fragment that had entered our solar system from deep interstellar space. Unlike Oumuamua or Borisov, Atlas behaved differently. It didn't simply pass through. It slowed down, shifted its rotation, and changed trajectory near Mars orbit before fading beyond detection range in 2020. For years, scientists assumed it had drifted back into the void. But in mid-2025, as Webb and several ground observatories coordinated for a survey near the asteroid belt, the object reappeared, brighter, hotter, and radiating narrow bands of infrared light inconsistent with any known asteroid composition. The reemergence triggered an emergency classification update at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. 3I Atlas wasn't supposed to return, yet here it was, following an orbital curve that made no gravitational sense. And just days later, the first signals appeared. Inside the Webb Science Operations Center in Baltimore, data analysts noticed irregular spikes in the telescope's near-infrared spectrograph, NIR-SPEC. The signal appeared faint but consistent, a rise at exactly 10.62 microns, repeating at predictable intervals. When cross-checked with the Deep Space Network antennas in Madrid and Canberra, the same signature emerged. A narrow-band, repeating transmission with modulated structure, not random static, but information. At first, the assumption was simple. Webb must have picked up a reflected signal from one of Earth's satellites, perhaps Starlink interference or radar scatter. But simulations ruled that out immediately. The angle of origin was far beyond Earth's field. Then came the anomaly that changed everything. The frequency slightly drifted, not due to Doppler shift, but due to intentional modulation. Each burst contained microsecond gaps, forming a pattern resembling prime numbers. Natural sources don't send prime numbers. Within 48 hours of the data surfacing, internal communications at NASA changed tone. The Webb logs were temporarily restricted. Several data repositories on the Mikulski archive for space telescopes went under maintenance. Analysts with clearance were told to pause external communication. Outside observers noticed. Amateur astronomers on Reddit and the Planetary Society forums began asking why 3I Atlas coordinates were suddenly missing from tracking databases. Then quietly, a NASA public affairs statement appeared online, a single sentence buried on the agency's update page. Routine recalibration of JWST instruments is ongoing. No anomalous detections have been confirmed. That statement was posted, edited twice, and then deleted. Behind the scenes, however, European Space Agency partners had already begun comparing data, and when cross-referencing Webb's signal logs with independent ground-based readings, the results matched perfectly. Whatever the source of that transmission was, it wasn't an error, it was real. By October 2025, the story began leaking through unofficial channels. A small group of astrophysicists affiliated with the Max Planck Institute for Radio Astronomy released an encrypted report summarizing the signal's modulation pattern. Though quickly retracted, archived copies spread across the scientific community. The document included a simple, chilling line. Signal exhibits structured intervals consistent with intentional transmission and coding. Media outlets picked up fragments of the story, first as rumor, then as urgent speculation. Has NASA found evidence of intelligent life? Why was the data restricted? Suddenly, public interest surged. Stock markets reacted to SpaceX speculation. Amateur radio operators worldwide pointed antennas toward the coordinates of 3I Atlas, and remarkably, some of them recorded weak but repeating echoes, confirming that the source wasn't localized to Webb. Meanwhile, a few government organizations, including the U.S. Space Command, classified the signal as unresolved anomalous phenomenon. Quietly, military communication satellites began recording all transmissions in that sector of space. Something or someone was broadcasting. The global scientific community fractured into debate. One camp argued the signal could be natural, perhaps a complex rotational echo caused by metallic minerals inside the object. Others believed it could be a technological relic, an ancient probe or data capsule drifting between star systems, now reactivated by sunlight or proximity to our solar system. A minority, though growing, began to suggest the unthinkable. The transmission might be intentional contact. A team at Cambridge University published a non-peer-reviewed paper proposing that the modulation resembled low-bandwidth analog encoding, similar to 1960s-era radio communication protocols. In other words, it wasn't random static, it was formatted information. But formatted into what? No one could tell. When decrypted into raw audio, the signal produced a low, rhythmic pulse, like a heart beating in vacuum. Others claimed to hear faint harmonic undertones, like musical intervals repeating every third burst. As theories spread, one question began to dominate scientific discourse. If it isn't human, what is it trying to say? Weeks later, new web imagery of 3I Atlas was quietly released to a limited internal network. Though officially classified, a few still frames found their way online. They showed the object's surface, not rocky or metallic, but smooth, with geometric ridges running along its axis. The material reflected light in a way consistent with structured layering, not natural formation. Infrared mapping revealed sections emitting localized heat signatures, hotspots that shifted over time, almost like energy nodes cycling through activation phases. When overlaid with the signal's transmission timing, the pulses synchronized perfectly with the thermal changes. Every burst of infrared light coincided with a transmission interval. In other words, 3I Atlas wasn't just sending a signal, it was responding to something. A relay, a beacon, or a probe checking in with its origin point. By December 2025, governments began quietly holding closed-door meetings. The United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, UNOOSA, called an emergency assembly. China's CNSA, the European Space Agency, and NASA all refused public comment. Leaked memos described a joint communication blackout plan under Protocol 7C, a contingency for unverified extraterrestrial contact. The goal: avoid global panic until confirmation. But silence didn't stop speculation. Social media erupted with theories that Webb had intercepted an alien distress call, a navigation ping, or even a warning from another civilization. A few whistleblowers suggested something even more disturbing, that the signal was not meant for us, that Earth merely happened to be in the path of a long-range transmission aimed somewhere else. Still, questions lingered. Why was it repeating every 6 hours? Why did its frequency shift slightly each cycle, as if adapting to interference? And most importantly, why was it getting stronger? On January 12, 2026, the signal abruptly changed. For the first time, it stopped pulsing in prime number sequences. Instead, it transmitted a continuous wave, lasting exactly 10 minutes, then silence. When decoded spectrographically, the waveform produced a pattern, not random, not geometric, but symbolic. Some analysts described it as resembling a map, a ring with intersecting arcs, similar to orbital trajectories. Others saw what looked like planetary alignment markers. NASA and ESA have not commented since. The James Webb team confirmed data anomalies under review, but declined to release the raw files. The final, haunting detail came from an independent radio observatory in Australia. Hours after the last transmission, 3I Atlas dimmed, not fading naturally, but shutting down, its infrared output dropping to absolute zero in under 15 minutes. Whatever sent that message turned itself off. Months after the official silence, a group of independent astronomers at Caltech quietly began reanalyzing the archived Webb data from before the blackout. Using advanced pattern recognition algorithms, they discovered something NASA's automated filters had missed: a secondary modulation embedded within the prime number sequences. It wasn't random noise. It appeared to be time-stamped. Each burst contained a microscopic fluctuation, precisely spaced at intervals that matched the rotation rate of the object itself. In essence, the signal wasn't just coming from 3I Atlas, it was synchronized with it. When this finding circulated among a small circle of astrophysicists, some began to suggest an extraordinary theory that the signal was self-referential, meaning the transmitter might be part of the object's structure, possibly recording or mapping its own trajectory through space. If true, it would imply the object isn't just emitting a message, it's documenting its own existence, as if trying to prove where it's been or what it's seen. In early 2026, research centers from Japan, South Africa, and Chile began quietly conducting independent scans at the same frequency Webb had observed. To everyone's shock, faint echoes of the same 6-hour signal were still detectable, even though 3I Atlas was supposedly dormant. But the direction of origin was slightly different each time, shifting by microdegrees, as if the source itself were moving through the solar system. This discovery reignited fears that 3I Atlas wasn't a static object at all. Some suggested it might have fragmented, releasing smaller structures still transmitting. Others suspected that the original signal had jumped, perhaps relayed to another source. For the first time, the term distributed intelligence entered the scientific discussion, implying that what we were detecting wasn't a single probe or vessel, but a networked intelligence system, one that could scatter itself across the void to avoid detection. A classified research group, reportedly established within the European Southern Observatory, began treating the signal as a form of data compression rather than audio or radio code. Using optical mathematics and entropy modeling, they reconstructed the frequency pulses into a two-dimensional array, and what emerged was staggering. The signal, when visualized, produced repeating grid-like formations resembling pictograms, structured, geometric patterns that repeated every 19th cycle. While no official statement has confirmed this interpretation, leaked images shared among data analysts showed symmetrical designs, spirals, parallel lines, and a central motif that looked uncannily like a double helix. Was it coincidence or a deliberate choice? If the signal contained encoded visuals or biochemical references, then the broadcaster wasn't merely identifying itself. It was communicating in symbols that mirrored life itself. Just when global attention began to fade, in late April 2026, another deep space anomaly appeared, this time beyond Jupiter's orbit. Radio telescopes in Argentina and Canada independently detected a mirror signal, nearly identical in structure but phase shifted by 3.2 milliseconds. The origin was triangulated to a faint, fast-moving object traveling opposite to 3I Atlas's last known vector. This discovery sent shockwaves through every major observatory. If two separate sources were emitting coordinated signals, then the first detection hadn't been a singular event. It was part of a system. Within weeks, the new object was designated 3I Atlas b. Its movement was calculated to intersect the solar plane by mid-2027, heading toward the inner system, directly between Earth and Mars. Scientists began to wonder, had Webb merely caught the first arrival of many? In May 2026, the global scientific community quietly received a directive through the International Telecommunication Union (ITU). All high-frequency deep space transmissions from Earth were to be suspended or encrypted. Publicly, it was explained as spectrum management. Privately, researchers knew the truth: Earth had decided to go radio silent. The fear wasn't that we had made contact, it was that we had been noticed. If the second source was moving deliberately, it might have already detected our electromagnetic footprint. By halting transmissions, world agencies hoped to reduce visibility, but this collective silence created unease among astronomers, many of whom believed open study, not secrecy, was the only path forward. To them, turning off humanity's voice in space was not protection, it was surrender. In July 2026, an internal memo allegedly from NASA's astrobiology division was leaked to investigative journalists. The 14-page document referenced a non-terrestrial coded emission correlated with structural thermal oscillation signatures. While heavily redacted, one phrase stood out: source exhibits intelligent pattern recognition behavior. The memo implied that the signal had responded to an experimental ping sent by one of Webb's calibration lasers, a test that should have gone unnoticed. But hours later, a return pulse had been detected, frequency matched and delayed exactly by the time it would take a signal to travel there and back. In effect, the object had answered. If this were true, then the universe had spoken back, and humanity was pretending not to hear. After months of containment, amateur astronomers and independent scientists formed a coalition called Signal Collective, pooling raw telemetry from publicly accessible telescopes worldwide. They reconstructed parts of the frequency patterns and published them as open data. To the shock of many, civilian decryption efforts produced audio files that, when converted to sound, revealed hauntingly harmonic tones, like voices layered in mechanical echo. Spectral analysis showed that these tones followed harmonic scales, not random intervals, leading many to propose that the transmission was intentionally designed to be interpretable through sound. As data spread across the internet, millions of users listened and speculated. Some described it as eerie yet beautiful, a mathematical song from across the stars. Others dismissed it as human misinterpretation. But one undeniable truth emerged. The pattern was mathematically perfect, far beyond what random physics could produce. In August 2026, astronomers noticed a new detail within the decoded imagery. Faint arcs within the pattern aligned perfectly with the orbital paths of Venus, Earth, and Mars, as they would appear on June 2, 2027. This date became the focus of every research agency's calendar. The transmission, some theorized, wasn't just a map, it was a countdown. NASA resumed limited communication with Webb to monitor changes, while the ESA coordinated with ground telescopes for real-time tracking. As weeks passed, the second object's path began to align exactly with the coordinates indicated in the signal. The implication was chilling. The message wasn't random, and it wasn't ancient. It was a schedule. Something was coming, and the universe had given us the date. As 2027 approaches, the world stands divided between fear and anticipation. Governments maintain silence, but the scientific community whispers of final preparations. Additional satellites launched under civilian disguise, data pipelines rerouted, and new monitoring stations established across Antarctica and the moon's far side. Yet despite the fear, curiosity endures. Every civilization in history has looked to the stars and wondered if someone was looking back. Now, for the first time, we might have an answer not in words, but in mathematics, structure, and light. The James Webb Telescope, humanity's window to creation, may have uncovered something older than time, and perhaps something waiting to be found again. And as the world waits for June 2, 2027, one question echoes across observatories and silent control rooms alike. If the message wasn't meant for us, what happens when the intended recipient finally answers? Today, the coordinates of 3I Atlas are blank in most public databases. The signal has not returned. The Webb team has shifted focus to other deep space targets. Officially, nothing has been found, but in confidential circles, scientists still whisper about those 6-hour intervals. Some claim to still detect faint echoes. microbursts buried in the cosmic background, repeating at the same rhythm, as if something out there is waiting for acknowledgement. Maybe it wasn't a greeting, maybe it wasn't a warning, maybe, just maybe, it was a check-in, and the universe is now waiting for our reply.